Hey guys, this is Miss Harlequin, and in this lesson, we are going to focus on editing. And our focus question is, how do we edit our narrative drafts for correct pronoun use? Alright, so first, we need to go over some of the basics. So what are pronouns, and how do we recognize pronouns within a sentence? Well, basically, pronouns are the words that replace a noun. So instead of constantly saying a character's name over and over again, after you use that character's name once, in the next sentence you could start to refer to that character through a pronoun. And so if it is a first person narrator, you could use I. If it is a third person narrator, then you might start your first sentence by saying, Harry Potter woke up in the morning, he got out of bed and went over to his broom. And so he would be the pronoun that is replacing Harry Potter's name. So the reason we use pronouns is because they help writers avoid repetition. And you avoid that repetition by replacing nouns that have already been named. Intensive nouns emphasize the subject of the sentence. And we're going to talk more about intensive nouns a little later in this lesson. First, let's start with the difference between subject and object pronouns, because that is really the basics between the two different types of pronouns. Subject pronouns are used when the pronoun is the subject of the sentence. So you can remember the subject pronouns easily by filling in the blank subject space for a simple sentence. So an example would be, blank did the job. And you could use any of the following subject pronouns to fill in that blank. It could be I, you, he, she, it, we, they. Any of those pronouns could easily take the place of the subject of the sentence. Instead of saying Harry did the job, you could say he did the job. Instead of saying Harry and Rose did the job, you could say they did the job. Subject pronouns are also used if they rename the subject. And they're going to follow to be verbs such as is, are, was, were, am, and will be. So an example would be, it is he. Who is it? He. This is she speaking. Who is speaking? She is speaking. It is we who are responsible. Who are responsible? We are responsible. Now, object pronouns, on the other hand, take the place of nouns that come after action verbs. So action verbs are verbs that describe very specific actions like ran, sing, ate. And so you have singular object pronouns like me, you, her, his, and its. And you can have plural pronouns like us, you, and their. Alright, let's look at some example sentences. So on the left, you have a sentence where a pronoun is not being used. It is directly naming each of the nouns that the sentence is referring to. So the mother bird feeds her babies. In this sentence, the subject is mother bird. What is the mother bird doing? She's feeding. So that's your verb right there. Who is she feeding? Her babies. So this is a secondary noun in this sentence. You could replace her babies with a pronoun. The mother bird feeds them. Mrs. Jones led our group on the hike. Our group is the secondary noun. It's not the subject of the sentence. The subject of the sentence is Miss Jones. You could replace a secondary noun with a pronoun. Miss Jones led us on the hike. The same thing in this last sentence. Jennifer helped Bill with his pack. Bill is the secondary noun. It is not the subject of the sentence. The subject of the sentence is Jennifer. So Jennifer helped him. I replace Bill with the pronoun him. Alright, so object pronouns can also take the place of a noun after these words. As, at, in, on, to, about, for, and by. Now, these words are known as prepositions. They're prepositions because they tell you the location of something. I closed the cap on my canteen. Where was the cap located? It was on my canteen. Instead of saying the secondary noun of canteen, again, because canteen is not the subject of the sentence, the subject is I, and what am I doing? I'm closing something. That's your predicate or your verb. You could say I closed the cap on it. So I replace the secondary noun with the pronoun, and that secondary noun comes after the preposition. Same thing here. Jose gave the compass to the hiker. Who did he give it to? He gave it to the hiker. So here's your preposition. And then I'm going to replace that secondary noun with the pronoun her. I decided that the hiker was female. And you can see that I add that preposition, I add that object pronoun after the preposition to. Alright, so now let's talk about intensive and reflexive pronouns. Reflexive pronouns are objects that refer to the subject, and they are usually going to end in self or selves, depending on if it is one person or if it is a group of people, plural. So basically, reflexive pronouns are pronouns that refer to a noun or another pronoun, and it indicates that the same person or thing is involved. The boy kicked himself. The boy is the subject of the sentence. What did the boy do? He kicked. Who did he kick? And so here you can see that this pronoun, the reflexive pronoun, is answering the who question in relationship to the action verb. The boy kicked himself. She made herself coffee. Again, the subject is she. What did she do? She made something. Who did she make it for? Herself. That is your reflexive pronoun. You should address the letter to yourself. You is the subject of the sentence. What are you doing? You're addressing the letter. And who are you addressing it to? You are addressing it to yourself. Intensive pronouns are used to emphasize another noun or a pronoun. That means they do not need to refer to the subject. They can refer to any old noun in the sentence, secondary nouns, or any other pronoun in the sentence. My sister herself paid for my popcorn. Alright, so my sister is the subject of the sentence. What did my sister do? She paid for something. And she paid herself, meaning she did the paying, for my popcorn. I made a sandwich for the president himself. Alright, so here you have I as the subject of the sentence. What did I do? I made something. What did I make? A sandwich. Who did I make it for? The president himself. That is your intensive pronoun. Now, in this first example, the intensive pronoun did refer to the subject, but as you can see in this example, the intensive pronoun did not refer to the subject. It's not himself who made the sandwich. The person made the sandwich for the president. Himself is referring to the secondary noun in the sentence, president. Okay. So now let's practice identifying pronouns, and we're going to use an excerpt from the model narrative for our writing task, The Scar, by Mia Walters. As I read the excerpt, I want you to think about where the pronouns are in the sentences below. Quit your crying, boy, bellowed my father. I myself never cried a tear in my life. He loomed over me, looking as mad as a hive of hornets that's been knocked out of a tree. Alright, so now as I look back at this excerpt, I want to identify all the pronouns. So I start on the first line, and I see that there is a pronoun right here, the word my. Then I see at the start of the dialogue that the father says I, which right there is a pronoun. I, myself, never cried a tear in my life. Then I see he, which I know is a pronoun. He loomed over me, pronoun. looking as mad as a hive of hornets that's been kicked out of a tree. All right, so I found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different pronouns. So now I want to see if I can identify where the writer used a pronoun to avoid repetition. All right, so now I have to determine who these pronouns are referring to and if any of these pronouns are replacing a previous noun. All right, so my father, that is the narrator, right? Happy. I myself never cried a tear in my life. So when he says I, he could have said, well, no, I guess he couldn't say anything else because people don't really refer to themselves in third person. He, okay. So here the narrator speaking, and when he says he, who is he talking about? He's talking about his father. So instead of saying my father loomed over me, he replaced that phrase. Okay, terrible writing. He replaced that phrase with the pronoun he. So right here is the answer to that question. Now, what subject is emphasized by the use of an intensive pronoun? All right, so if I remember, and I might not remember, so maybe I'm going to go back in the video and see that intensive pronouns emphasize a noun or pronoun, like herself or himself. All right, so there was myself. And so I can see that this right here is the father emphasizing himself, I, myself. So that right there answers this question. What subject is emphasized by the use of an intensive pronoun? I, the father, is emphasized. All right, let's see if we can replace object and subject pronouns. So we're going to use the same example. We're going to start with, who is the narrator talking about? All right, well, the narrator is talking about his father, my father. What's the subject of the third sentence? So I go to the third sentence. He, so it's the father. I'm not even going to try to write it this time. I'm just going to put an F there for father. To whom does Happy show his burned hand in paragraph 2? Well, again, I remember the story. I don't even need to look back on it. I know that that is the father. What pronoun is used? Again, they're using the pronoun he. And why is he using that? Again, it is to avoid repetition. If he was constantly saying my father, my father, my father, then it would be almost like a children's story, like See Spot Run. And you use patterns like that when you're writing to children because you're trying to teach them the basics of the English language. All right, pronouns that show possession. Paragraph 12, he stopped counting. I saw a flash in his eye. We got ourselves a little problem then, he said, holding out his hard, beefy hand. That money's mine. How else could the author show possession? Well, he could have said the money that belongs to me. But instead, he uses the possessive pronoun, mine. And how does the possessive pronoun affect the writing? It makes it flow a little bit easier. Just compare the original sentence, that money's mine, with the money that belongs to me. This is a lot wordier, and it's a lot harder to actually say. And it doesn't really sound natural. People wouldn't really speak this way with a wordy sentence. All right, so now it is time to practice on your own. On the screen, you have 4 sentences, and what I would like for you to do is rewrite these sentences using a pronoun for each of the underlined words. Sentence 1, my dog ran away, my friend Jessie yelped. Sentence 2, we searched all over the neighborhood with her dads and brothers. Sentence 3, when we finally found him, the dog's fur was caked in mud. Sentence 4, I hope I never lose my dog like that. Write your rewritten sentences on a sheet of loose leaf paper. Then you are going to press the turn in button on Edmodo, and you are going to, in the turn in box, type your 4 rewritten sentences for me to check. When you're done with this activity, go back into your draft and look over your pronoun use. Have you used pronouns correctly? Are there places where you have overused a noun and you can replace it with a pronoun? And as a challenge, see if there are any places in your draft where you can use an intensive pronoun to emphasize a noun. So you're looking to use intensive pronouns like myself, herself, himself. And so having your character really emphasize that they're speaking about themselves or speaking about somebody else. So maybe having something like June knew she was going to be able to do it herself.